For most of the last century, the global story felt settled. Power had a clear center, decisions flowed in predictable directions, and the future seemed tied to one dominant model. But quietly, without a single declaration or dramatic announcement, that certainty began to fade. Factories shifted, trade routes changed, new infrastructure appeared in places the world once ignored, and slowly, almost uncomfortably, one reality became impossible to deny. China was rising, not just economically, but strategically, psychologically, and globally. This rise did not come with conquest or global war. It came with patience, planning, and a long memory of history. That is exactly why it feels so powerful and so unsettling. Because history teaches a dangerous lesson. Every time the world watches a power rise with confidence and speed, it also watches that power approach its most vulnerable phase. This video is not about predicting collapse or celebrating dominance. It is about understanding patterns that repeat so consistently that ignoring them becomes a mistake. China's rise looks impressive, disciplined, and inevitable. But history whispers a warning that most people choose not to hear until it is too late. And that warning has nothing to do with strength alone. It has everything to do with what comes next. Every rising power begins its journey with momentum on its side. Growth creates confidence, and confidence creates belief. In China's case, decades of economic expansion have produced a powerful narrative. Long-term planning works. Stability beats chaos, and national discipline delivers results. This belief is reinforced by visible success, modern cities, advanced technology, global trade dominance, and increasing diplomatic reach. But history shows that this phase is the most deceptive. Rising powers rarely see their limits while they are still climbing. Instead, success becomes proof that their model is immune to the failures of others. Rome believed its system was eternal. Imperial Germany believed industrial strength guaranteed dominance. Japan believed disciplined expansion would secure its future. The Soviet Union believed ideology would outlast economics. Each of these powers reached a moment where momentum masked vulnerability. China today stands at a similar psychological point, where success creates certainty and certainty reduces caution. History does not punish ambition, it punishes the belief that ambition alone is enough. This is the moment when rising powers stop asking whether they should act and begin assuming they must. That assumption has ended empires before, even when their power seemed unquestionable. China's economic rise is often treated as its greatest strength, and in many ways, it is manufacturing capacity. Trade networks, financial reserves, and global investment projects have transformed China into a central pillar of the world economy. But history warns that economic size does not automatically translate into economic control. Large economies create dependencies, but they also create obligations. As China's global footprint expands, so do the expectations placed upon it. Expectations to stabilize markets, manage crises, and absorb shocks. Previous rising powers underestimated this burden. Britain learned that global trade dominance demanded constant naval protection and political intervention. The United States learned that economic leadership required endless crisis management. Economic influence attracts responsibility, whether a nation wants it or not. For China, the challenge is not growth, but sustainability. Maintaining expansion while avoiding overreach is historically rare. The illusion lies in believing that economic tools can manage every problem. History suggests that when economics becomes a substitute for strategy, rising powers begin to drift toward difficult choices they are not fully prepared to face. Overconfidence does not announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, disguised as rational confidence. Rising powers convince themselves that they understand history better than their predecessors. They study past empires not to learn humility, but to identify mistakes they believe they will never repeat. This is where the pattern becomes dangerous. Germany before the First World War believed it had calculated every risk. Japan before the Second World War believed it had identified the window where action was unavoidable. The Soviet Union believed its internal unity was stronger than reality. In each case, leaders believed they were acting logically, even defensively. China's leadership emphasizes caution and long-term thinking. But history warns that even the most disciplined systems are vulnerable to the pressure of momentum. When power grows quickly, patience becomes harder to maintain. Strategic overconfidence does not mean reckless behavior. It means believing that every move is justified by necessity. That belief has ended eras before, even when intentions were measured and calculated. Have you ever wondered what makes a rising power suddenly turn aggressive? It's not always about strength. Sometimes, it's about the fear of losing it. History shows us a dangerous pattern called the closing window mindset. This is when leaders of a growing nation start to worry that their time is running out. Their amazing growth starts to slow down, their population gets older, and other countries start pushing back. Think about it. Germany, before World War I, feared being surrounded. Japan worried its resources would be cut off. They believed their future would be weaker than their present, so they felt they had to act immediately. This doesn't make war a certainty, but it makes it a powerful temptation. Today, as we watch global dynamics shift, it's a crucial lesson to remember. The most dangerous moment for a rising power is when they fear their best days are behind them. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more insights. No rising power exists in isolation. Growth changes the balance of relationships, and those changes provoke responses. As China expands its influence, other nations adapt, alliances shift, counterbalances form. This is not hostility, it is a natural response to imbalance. History shows that resistance does not require aggression, it only requires perception. Rome faced coalitions, Britain faced rivals, the United States faced challengers. China will face the same dynamic. The more influential a power becomes, the more others coordinate quietly. This creates an environment where misunderstandings multiply and trust becomes fragile. Rising powers often interpret resistance as unfair opposition rather than structural response. That misunderstanding deepens tension and narrows options. Ever wondered what happens inside a country when it starts expanding its power across the globe? It's not just about what we see on the world stage. Historically, when a nation grows, its resources and attention naturally shift outwards. This can make problems at home, like economic inequality or regional gaps, much tougher to handle. Think about it. As a country gets richer and more powerful, people's expectations for a better life also soar. It becomes a tricky balancing act for leaders, projecting strength abroad while making sure things are stable and fair back home. Many great powers in history didn't fall because of foreign enemies, but because they stretched themselves too thin, forgetting that true strength starts from within. It's a timeless lesson that's as relevant today as it was centuries ago. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more insights. History does not issue dramatic warnings. It offers patterns, parallels, and quiet signals. These signals are easy to dismiss during periods of success. Rising powers interpret warnings as pessimism, criticism, or misunderstanding. But history is not emotional, it is statistical. When similar conditions appear repeatedly, similar outcomes become more likely. China's rise contains many elements seen before: long growth, disciplined governance, expanding influence, and increasing global attention. None of these guarantee failure, but together, they place China at a familiar historical crossroads. The warning is not about collapse, it is about choice. Rising to prominence and sustaining dominance are fundamentally different challenges. History shows that the skills required to grow are not the same skills required to stabilize. Growth rewards ambition, dominance rewards restraint. Many powers excel at the first and fail at the second. China's challenge will not be achieving influence, it has already done that. The challenge will be managing expectations, avoiding overextension, and navigating resistance without turning competition into confrontation. History warns that this transition phase defines outcomes more than initial success. China's rise is real, impressive, and historically significant. But history's warning is not about strength fading, it is about strength creating new pressures. The most dangerous moment for any rising power is when success feels permanent and momentum feels unstoppable. That is when choices become heavier, consequences grow larger, and mistakes become harder to reverse. History does not predict China's future, it offers a mirror. What China sees in that mirror, and how it responds, will determine what comes next. As China's global influence expands, its greatest risk might not be from its rivals, but from an age-old illusion, the belief that complex systems can be fully controlled. History is filled with examples. Rome tried to manage a vast empire with bureaucracy. Britain used its navy to command global trade. The Soviet Union relied on centralized planning. Each believed they could master complexity, and each eventually learned that complexity always wins. It grows faster than our ability to control it. China's model of long-term planning has achieved incredible success, but as it integrates more deeply into global networks, it will face unexpected challenges. Influence isn't just about power, it's about accountability. A crisis in one corner of the world can create demands that even the most powerful nations struggle to meet. The real lesson from history is that influence brings responsibility, and responsibility reveals the limits that growth alone cannot erase. Thanks for watching. China's rise has been marked by patience rather than haste. This patience has often been praised as a key advantage over past rising powers that rushed toward confrontation. Yet history reveals a subtle transformation that occurs when patience turns into pressure. As power accumulates, expectations rise. Domestic audiences expect results. National pride demands recognition. International actors test boundaries. What was once patience becomes a burden of restraint. Leaders begin to face questions not about whether to act, but why they are not acting faster. Germany, before World War I, experienced this shift when industrial and military strength created public expectations of global recognition. Japan experienced it when regional dominance seemed within reach, but threatened by external constraints. Strategic patience erodes when leaders feel that restraint risks losing momentum. China will face similar pressures as its rise matures. The challenge will not be resisting aggression, but managing expectation. History warns that this is the phase where misjudgments become most likely, not because leaders abandon caution, but because caution itself becomes politically costly. As China rises, the world's reaction will not be uniform, coordinated, or predictable. History shows that global responses to rising powers are fragmented. Some nations align for opportunity, others resist for security. Many attempt neutrality while quietly preparing for change. This creates a dynamic environment where intentions are easily misread. Rising powers often interpret resistance as hostility rather than structural adjustment. They see alliances forming and assume containment, even when those alliances are defensive in nature. This misinterpretation has fueled conflict throughout history. Rome saw coalitions as rebellion. Germany saw alliances as encirclement. The United States saw rival blocs as ideological threats. China will encounter similar dynamics. The more unavoidable its influence becomes, the more nations will seek balance. This balancing behavior does not require confrontation, but it does create friction. History warns that friction accumulates silently until a single event exposes how fragile trust has become. Economic leverage is often viewed as a peaceful alternative to military force. Trade, investment, and infrastructure create influence without conflict. But history shows that economic tools can produce unintended consequences. Dependence breeds resentment. Influence invites backlash. Britain discovered that global trade dominance required constant enforcement. The United States learned that financial power created global expectations during crises. China's economic reach through trade networks and infrastructure projects offers immense influence, but it also creates dependency relationships that can turn politically sensitive. Nations reliant on economic ties often seek diversification rather than submission. When economic leverage is perceived as coercive, resistance grows quietly. History warns that economic power, when used too assertively, accelerates the formation of alternatives. The challenge for China will be balancing influence with reassurance, a balance few rising powers have successfully maintained. History repeatedly shows that external ambition competes with internal stability. Rising powers must decide how much attention and resources they devote outward versus inward. Domestic cohesion, social expectations, and economic transformation demand constant focus. China's internal challenges, including demographic shifts, economic restructuring, and regional disparities, will intensify as its global role expands. Managing these internal pressures, while projecting strength abroad, is historically difficult. Rome struggled with internal inequality. Britain faced imperial fatigue. The Soviet Union collapsed under internal strain. Rising powers often assume internal stability will persist automatically, but history warns that domestic challenges grow more complex as global responsibilities increase. The true test of China's rise will not be its ability to project power, but its ability to maintain balance between internal needs and external ambition. China places great emphasis on historical awareness. Lessons from past empires are studied, discussed, and referenced. This awareness is a strength, but history warns that confidence in understanding history can itself become a vulnerability. Many empires believed they understood why others failed and therefore assumed immunity. Rome studied Greece. Britain studied Rome. The Soviet Union studied capitalism. Each believed knowledge equaled protection. But history is not a checklist. It is a pattern of human behavior under pressure. Understanding past mistakes does not guarantee avoiding new ones. The danger lies in believing that awareness alone prevents repetition. History warns that humility, not confidence, determines survival. Every rising power reaches a moment when restraint becomes more important than expansion. This moment is rarely obvious. Opportunities still appear. Advantages still exist. Momentum still feels strong. But history shows that restraint at the peak preserves influence longer than expansion ever could. Britain extended influence by retreating strategically. The United States stabilized its dominance through alliances rather than conquest. Powers that failed to choose restraint paid a higher price. China will face decisions where restraint preserves stability, but expansion promises immediate gains. History warns that choosing immediate advantage over long-term balance often defines decline. Does history predict the future? Not really. Think of it more like a map that shows you where the dangerous roads are. Throughout time, rising powers, nations gaining strength and influence, have entered these higher risk zones. It's a tricky intersection where rapid growth, soaring confidence, and increasing complexity all meet. Today, China finds itself right in the middle of this historically familiar risk zone. Now, this doesn't mean conflict or collapse is a sure thing. Not at all. What it does guarantee is that everything becomes more intense. The consequences are bigger. Every decision, big or small, carries much more weight. Mistakes become far more costly, and even success itself becomes a much harder thing to manage. So, what's the lesson from history? It's not a warning of definite failure. Instead, it's a sober reminder that as you rise, the room for error gets smaller and smaller. Thanks for watching. China's future will not be shaped by its actions alone. The world's response will matter just as much. History shows that rising powers and established powers often misunderstand each other simultaneously. Fear, pride, and miscommunication amplify risk. The post-American world will require negotiation rather than dominance. China's ability to navigate this environment will depend not only on strength, but on perception. History warns that perception often outweighs intention. Have you ever noticed how history whispers warnings to us? It's this quiet, consistent voice. Throughout time, we've seen great powers rise, only to stumble and fall. And you know when the fall usually begins. It's when they start believing their success has answered every single question, when they think they're invincible. Right now, we're witnessing China's incredible rise. It's one of the most significant shifts of our lifetime. But what comes next is what truly matters. The path forward isn't paved with more of the same. It demands something different: restraint, the ability to adapt, and a healthy dose of humility. Because here's the thing, the next chapter is always the hardest one to write. Believing you've already won is the surest way to lose the long game. The real test isn't just rising to power, it's how you wield it. Thanks for watching, and if this made you think, consider subscribing for more.